Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, April 4th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today: AI machine directs Israel's bombing spree in Gaza. So this is a huge article from 972 magazine about an AI system called Lavender that directs Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza. And so if this sounds familiar, that's because a few months ago, 972 reported on a different AI system that Israel has that's called the Gospel. And what that does is create targets based on buildings. The Lavender one is based on people. And essentially what it does is it determines with whatever the Israeli military inputs, if certain people are Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or whether they're loosely linked to them or if they're, members, and it determines if they're potential targets or not. And this thing has about a 10% rate of error, according to this report. But that didn't matter to the Israeli military. They are bombing whatever targets this thing comes up with without even really double checking. There's no human oversight, really. So this is a very long investigation that they published. And I just want to read they kind of put a summary at the beginning that I will read that really details it and how horrific it is. And then I just hit a few points in the longer investigation. So a new investigation by 972 magazine and Local Call reveals that the Israeli army has developed an artificial intelligence-based program known as Lavender, unveiled here for the first time. According to 6 Israeli intelligence officers who have all served in the army during the current war on the Gaza Strip and had first-hand involvement with the use of AI to generate targets for assassination, Lavender has played a central role in the unprecedented bombings of Palestinians, especially during the early stages of the war. In fact, according to the sources, its influence on the military operations was such that they essentially treated the outputs of the AI machine as if it were a human decision. So again, no human oversight. They give them a target and they hit it, even though knowing that it can make errors. Formally, the Lavender system is designed to mark all suspected operatives in the military wings of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, including low-ranking ones, as potential bombing targets. The sources told 972 that during the first weeks of the war, the army almost completely relied on Lavender, which clocked as many as 37,000 Palestinians as suspected militants and their homes for possible airstrikes. During the early stages of the war, the army gave sweeping approval for officers to adopt Lavender's kill lists with no requirement to thoroughly check why the machine made those choices or to examine the raw intelligence data on which they were based. One source stated that human personnel often served only as a rubber stamp for the machine's decisions, adding that normally they would personally devote only about 20 seconds to each target before authorizing a bombing, just to make sure the Lavender-marked target is a male. This was despite knowing that the system makes what are regarded as errors in approximately 10% of cases and is known to occasionally mark individuals who have merely a loose connection to militant groups or no connection at all. Moreover, the Israeli army systematically attacked the targeted individuals while they were in their homes, usually at night while their whole families were present, rather than during the course of military activity. According to the sources, this was because from what they regarded as an intelligence standpoint, it was easier to locate the individuals in their private houses. Additional automated systems. So they have an automated system that is called Where's Daddy? And that was used specifically to track the targeted individuals and carry out bombings when they had entered their family residences. And it's called Where's Daddy? So it's the name of this system that they use to bomb these entire family residences, is mocking the children who are being targeted. So the result is that thousands of Palestinians, most of them women and children or people who were not involved in the fighting, were wiped out by Israeli airstrikes, especially during the first weeks of the war, because of the AI program's decisions. One source said, quote, "We were not interested in killing Hamas operatives only when they were in a military building or engaged in a military activity. On the contrary, the IDF bombed them in homes without hesitation. As a first option, it's much easier to bomb a family's home. The system is built to look for them in all these situations," end quote. So again, they talk about the Gospel, the other AI system, and that report that they had a few months back was saying that Israel bombed purposely civilian targets, and they called them power targets. And it said that they were purposely bombing high-rise buildings that civilians lived in. And it also says that for junior militants, they used what they call dumb bombs to bomb them because they didn't want to waste the money on the precision-guided stuff for junior militants. And when they use these dumb bombs, they can collapse, entire buildings. So another thing that Israel did here, and we saw a little bit of this in their previous report, they decided that it was permissible to kill 15 or 20 civilians for every junior Hamas operative. 15 or 20 civilians can be killed for every junior Hamas operative. And then the ratio for a single commander is more than 100 civilians that they're willing to kill to get one commander. So I think this is a way of them loosening these restrictions just so they, can target as many civilians as they want. That's what it seems like to me. So again, they get into a lot of detail here, but just one thing I want to mention, kind of deep into this investigation, is just some of the quotes from bombing the family homes that are packed with children. The sources who spoke to 972 explained that there was sometimes a substantial gap between the moment that tracking systems like Where's Daddy alerted an officer that a target had entered their house and the bombing itself, leading to the killing of whole families even without hitting the army's target. One source said, quote, "It happened to me many times that we attacked a house, but the person wasn't even home," end quote. And they said that the result is that you killed an entire family for no reason. 3 intelligence sources told 972 that they had witnessed an incident in which the Israeli army bombed a family's private home, and it later turned out that the intended target of the assassination was not even inside the house, since no further verification was conducted in real time. So it's just a crazy story, and it's really kind of dystopian, the idea that these AI systems are controlling this war, this bombing campaign in Gaza, this slaughter of Palestinians. All right, so the next one here, this isn't going to be a surprise to anybody. President Biden is not changing Israeli policy after the slaughter of aid workers. So President Biden has no plans to change his policy of unconditional support for Israel, even after the Israeli military systematically killed 7 aid workers, including an American citizen. And this was reported by Politico on Wednesday. So Biden put out this statement claiming that he was outraged over the attack and called for an investigation, but U.S. officials said that's as far as he is going to go. And of course, many media outlets picked that up, and the headline was Biden's outraged over this airstrike. There were these multiple airstrikes on these aid workers, but he's not going to do anything about it. The White House has also backed Israel's claim that the strikes on the aid workers were an accident, despite clear evidence that it was intentional. And John Kirby, the National Security Council spokesman, he was asked on Wednesday if there would be any change to U.S. policy. And he said, quote, "We are still supporting their right to defend themselves, and we're going to continue to do that," end quote. And he's still calling it defending themselves. I mean, look at that report I just went over of them slaughtering entire families for no reason. Well, for a reason, because they want to kill civilians. But this is what the U.S. is still calling defending itself. And if we know that, if that's what the Israeli military is doing, the U.S. must be aware of these AI systems and this process that they have. So the Politico report said that there was some officials within the Biden administration who were unhappy with Biden's full-throated support for Israel. One U.S. official said, quote, "It's just rinse and repeat with the Israelis. The American political system can't or won't draw a real line with them, and that is regrettable," end quote. And of course, Despite all these claims that they're concerned about civilian casualties, Biden's approving these new bomb shipments, new big fighter jet deals to continue to support this genocidal campaign. All right, so the next one here, Israel targeted these aid workers systematically and car by car. So this is Jose Andres. He is a celebrity chef, and he was the founder of the World Central Kitchen. He said on Wednesday that Israel killed aid workers for his organization systematically and car by car, and he's not buying this claim that it was an accident. So 7 of these World Kitchen workers were killed, including an American, 3 British nationals, a Palestinian, an Australian, and a Polish citizen. And again, I know I went over this yesterday, but they were in 3 cars driving along a route that was approved by the Israeli military. They coordinated with the Israeli military. A missile hit the first car, and then the second car, after injured people from the first car went into that one. The second car was hit. The third car picked up some of the people, and then the third strike finished the job and killed all of them. So obviously not an accident. And that's what Andres is saying. He said, quote, "This is not just a bad luck situation where, oops, we dropped the bomb in the wrong place. Even if we were not in coordination with the Israeli military, no democratic country and no military can be targeting civilians and humanitarians," end quote. And he said that the U.S. should do more to stop Israel's slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza. He said, quote, "The U.S. must do more to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu this war needs to end now," end quote. So what's interesting about Andres is that he has previously defended Israel's conduct in Gaza. And this was in response to a Spanish minister. He's a Spanish American. This was in response to a Spanish minister calling it a genocide back in October. He said, quote, "You as minister have to first recognize that Hamas attack against civilians is a terrorist attack and that Israel is defending its citizens. Then you can ask for restraint and respect for the lives of civilians in Gaza," end quote. And there's an interesting report from the Gray Zone. This came out about a week ago before this strike about this guy, Andres, and his World Central Kitchen aid group. And he's real chummy with Anthony Blinken, with Samantha Power. He's in with all the Democratic establishment that's in power right now. And they were looking at his group as the potential replacement for UNRWA. Now, the World Central Kitchen and other aid groups have suspended aid, and this is going to contribute to the starvation in Gaza. And I think this is exactly what Israel wanted. All right, so the next one here, how Israel's aid convoy attack brings Palestinians closer to famine. This is an article from Middle East Eye about that. And the Israeli attack that killed 7 aid workers from the World Central Kitchen on Monday is yet another blow to efforts to bring aid to the starving population of the Gaza Strip. The attack killed WCK's entire operations team in Gaza, prompting the organization to suspend its operations. So the World Food Program said that the World Central Kitchen is a critical organization that feeds 500,000 people each day in Gaza with hot meals, basically saying that they can't afford to lose that. And this is, again, as the entire population is on the brink of famine. And this is what could, and famine could be happening in certain parts of Gaza already. There's just a lot to say about this and the U.S. supporting this. And of course, this wasn't the first time they've targeted aid workers. They've killed at least 165 UNRWA aid workers. They've targeted, obviously, hospitals and medical facilities so much. This is just par for the course for what Israel is doing in Gaza. This just has gotten much more attention because this time they killed foreign aid workers and an American and 3 British citizens. All right, so the next one here, Israel and the U.S. brace for potential Iranian retaliation. So the U.S. and Israel are bracing for potential Iranian retaliation for the Israeli bombing of Iran's consulate building in Damascus, which killed 7 members of the IRGC, including a senior Quds Force commander and another general. Israel frequently kills Iranians in Syria and conducts covert attacks inside Iran, including assassinations and things like that. But this attack on an Iranian diplomatic facility, this is a huge escalation. And Iran is usually very restrained in its response to Israel, if they respond at all. But according to Israeli media, Israel is preparing for a direct Iranian attack in response, a direct Iranian attack on Israel. Israeli security sources said that they believe Iran was determined to respond more than ever before. And Israel's Channel 12 reported that Israel is at the highest state of alert in preparation for a potential attack. So a direct Iranian attack could be exactly what Israel wants, since it appears to be trying to provoke a big regional war that it hopes the U.S. will get directly involved in. And so U.S. officials are saying that they're also preparing for attacks on U.S. personnel. The U.S. has denied any role in the Israeli attack on the diplomatic facility, but Iranian officials have said that the U.S. must be held accountable for its military support for Israel, whatever that means. Doesn't really sound like a threat, but according to AP, they just outlined some of the support for Israel. The U.S. provides Israel with about 70% of its weapons and funds 15% of its military budget, which that's a statistic I was not aware of, that U.S. military aid apparently amounts to 15% of their military budget, which is crazy. The Israeli attack on the embassy appeared to be carried out using U.S.-provided aircraft and munitions. So by the U.S.'s own logic, that means its support for Israel is enough to blame it for the consulate attack, because the U.S. said Iran was responsible for attacks on U.S. troops by Iraqi Shia militias because they armed the groups. And even though the Pentagon said that they had no evidence Iran was directly involved in those attacks. So this could be that logic coming back to bite the U.S. And now there's the risk of, you had all these attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria by the Iraqi Shia militias. And then after the Tower 22 attack, which killed 3 U.S. troops, Iran and the Iraqi government pressured these militias to stop, because Iran got worried that there's a big war was going to break out. So now after this, it's possible Iran could give them kind of the green light and say, all right, we're not going to stop you anymore. So there's all sorts of possibilities of how Iran could respond. I would be surprised. I mean, I know this is a big, huge attack on Iran, but if they go for like a direct missile strike on Israel, I would be surprised. And if they did that, they would probably do it in coordination with Hezbollah. They would probably launch something big as well. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So the next one here, Wisconsin votes against U.S. support for Israel. So on Tuesday, nearly 50,000 people cast votes for uninstructed in the Wisconsin Democratic primary as a way to protest President Biden's full-throated support for the Israeli slaughter of Palestinians. So this was 48,091 votes, and that accounted for 8.3% of the primary, and it far exceeded the organizers' goal of about 20,000 votes, which was the margin of victory for Biden in Wisconsin for the 2020 election. So this is the same thing as voting uncommitted, as we've seen in other states. It's just called uninstructed on the ballot in Wisconsin for some reason. And there was also primaries in Connecticut, where 11.4% voted uncommitted, and also in Rhode Island, where 14.9% voted uncommitted. So these are numbers that will cost Biden the election if he doesn't change anything. You know, these are numbers that will affect the race between Biden and Trump. And we've seen this across the country in these primaries. The most significant one was Michigan, which of course is a big swing state, and it has a sizable Arab population. Over 100,000 people voted uncommitted in their primary. And Democrats are afraid that Biden's backing of this genocidal war will cost him the election in November. We've also seen all his campaign events getting disrupted by protesters calling him Genocide Joe and things like that. But yet he continues to just, 100% support Israel. All right, so the next one here, an active duty airman is on a hunger strike against Gaza starvation. So this article is from Jerry Condon, someone he's with Veterans for Peace. So an active duty Air Force airman is on a hunger strike in front of the White House in solidarity with the children of Gaza who are being deliberately starved to death. Larry Hebert, a senior airman with 6 years in the Air Force, began his hunger strike at the White House on Easter Sunday. He says he will be present at the White House from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., April 1st to the 6th, and then move to the House of Representatives beginning Monday, April 8th, when Congress is back in session. Airman Hebert, who recently joined the organization Veterans for Peace, says he was inspired by the self-immolation of active duty airman Aaron Bushnell. He said, quote, "When Aaron Bushnell took his own life at the Israeli embassy for the people of Gaza, that had a profound impact on me. I felt and resonated exactly with how he was feeling, and so that was really powerful and influential. But what really infuriated me was the response afterward. Leadership within the military and within our government were just silent. There was utter silence surrounding Aaron Bushnell and what he did. I knew I had to raise my voice in opposition to the U.S. government supplying Israel the bombs and rockets to commit genocide in Gaza. Active duty members are afraid to speak out, and I hope my example and that of others like Aaron can change that," end quote. So he's still active duty in mid-March. And he's from New Hampshire himself. He took an authorized leave from his assignment at a naval station in Spain, and since then he has participated in demonstrations demanding a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and visited several congressional offices to press for an end to U.S. weapon shipments to Israel, which violate several U.S. laws. And Jerry outlined all the laws foreign assistance laws that are violated by the U.S. arming Israel. So this goes to show, the dissent from within the U.S. military, which I think is significant. I'm sure that there are more people who are disgusted with what they're supporting, with what the U.S. is supporting. All right, so the next one here, Hamas sticks to its demand for a permanent ceasefire. So the head of Hamas's political bureau said Wednesday that the Palestinian group is sticking to its demand for a permanent ceasefire and withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza as a condition for a hostage deal. So this is Ismail Haniyeh. He is based in Qatar. He's, again, the head of their political bureau. He said, quote, "We are committed to our demands, the permanent ceasefire, comprehensive and complete withdrawal of the enemy out of the Gaza Strip, the return of all displaced people to their homes, allowing all aid needed for our people in Gaza, rebuilding the Strip, lifting the blockade, and achieving an honorable prisoner exchange deal," end quote. So also on Wednesday, Qatar, which is mediating the talks, said that one of the main sticking points in the indirect negotiations is the issue of displaced Palestinians being able to return to their homes, if there's anything left of their homes, but being able to return to North Gaza mainly. And Israel has repeatedly rejected Hamas's condition for a permanent ceasefire. Netanyahu has made clear any truce, any ceasefire will be temporary, and that he's going to invade Rafah and all that. So you see all these Israel supporters saying, if Hamas just released the hostages, this would be over. That's not true. Netanyahu's made it very clear that that's not true. And as time goes on, more and more Israeli hostages are going to die. There was a report from Haaretz last week that said Israel believes only 60 to 70 of the 134 people that they believed were remaining in Gaza are alive. So as time goes on, more of them are going to die. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. scraps planned visit to the Middle East to normalize Saudi-Israeli ties. So this article is from the Libertarian Institute, from Kyle Anzalone, and it says that the White House has indefinitely suspended a trip by a high-level delegation to the Middle East that was going to go there to work on this Saudi-Israel normalization deal that is just a total pipe dream at this point. And this is the mastermind of this is Brett McGurk, who is Biden's top official on the National Security Council. He's apparently been pushing this delusional idea of Israel and Saudi Arabia normalizing relations and then that somehow leading to some sort of two-state solution. I mean, it's just completely out of touch with reality. The Saudis did seem like they were ready to normalize relations with Israel without them giving any real concessions to the Palestinians before October 7th. But this has obviously changed, especially as this slaughter continues. But we still see Blinken and all these U.S. officials talk about this idea of this Israel-Saudi normalization deal. But now they've canceled this, and it looks like, according to Akbar Shahid Ahmed, who's a senior reporter for the HuffPost, he said that it's canceled indefinitely for now. All right, so the next story here, the Ukrainian military says the front lines are at risk of collapsing. So high-ranking Ukrainian military officers have told Politico that the front lines in Ukraine are at risk of collapsing and that there are no weapons the West could provide to help the situation. These officers who served under Valery Zaluzhny, the former Ukrainian commander-in-chief, said that Ukrainian lines could collapse wherever Russia decides to focus its offensive. One of the officers said, quote, "There's nothing that can help Ukraine now because there are no serious technologies able to compensate Ukraine for the large mass of troops Russia is likely to hurl at us. We don't have those technologies, and the West doesn't have them as well in sufficient numbers." And another officer said that Western weapons would become ineffective. They quickly become ineffective once Russia learns how to counter them. So one official said, quote, "Weapon systems become very redundant quickly because they're quickly countered by the Russians. For example, we use the Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles successfully, but just for a short time. The Russians are always studying. They don't give us a second chance, and they're successful in this," end quote. So as Ukraine, in the face of the defeat on the battlefield, Ukraine has increased its attacks inside Russia, inside Russian territory, drone attacks, sabotage attacks, things like that. And now there was this report from The Guardian quoting officials within Ukraine's military intelligence unit, known as the GUR, threatening that they're going to bomb the Crimean Bridge again for the third time. And again, this risks escalation because Russia views all of these operations as NATO supported, which they are. So this GRU official is saying that they're going to do it in the first half of 2024. They're claiming they're going to take the bridge out entirely, that it won't be able to be repaired. So it's just still this big risk of escalation when it comes to this war is still very real. And the Washington Post and the New York Times both had reports recently about how the CIA basically built up Ukraine's intelligence services after the 2014 coup in Kiev, including the GUR. One official that they quoted said that the GUR was the CIA's little baby that they created into this intelligence force that can carry out these attacks inside Russia. So, it's just incredible how involved the U.S., the CIA, is when it comes to direct attacks on Russia. All right, so the last story here, Ukraine aid vote not expected in the House for weeks or longer. So House Speaker Mike Johnson said over the weekend that he would move forward with Ukraine aid right away when Congress returned from its Easter break next week. But Bloomberg reported on Wednesday that a vote likely won't happen until mid-April or later due to divisions among Republicans. So I didn't realize that Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's been threatening to hold a vote to oust Johnson. And she doubled down on that threat on Wednesday if he forces a vote on Ukraine aid. She said, quote, "Let me tell you, when he forces that vote again under suspension with no amendments and funds Ukraine and people find out how angry their constituents are about it, that's going to move the needle even more," end quote. So other Republicans they're looking for Johnson to get concessions from Biden for pushing through the $95 billion foreign military aid bill that includes Ukraine funding Israel, Taiwan, just a complete mess of a bill. So Johnson says he's looking for ways to offset the cost, like seizing the Russian assets or loaning the money, but that would require other different types of legislation. So we'll see. I mean, it would be good if this just keeps getting delayed. I mean, that might be the best thing that we could hope for. And Democrats are looking to bypass Johnson to force a vote on the foreign military aid bill through this discharge petition, which requires 218 signatures. So far, it has 192 signatures. There's a group of 22 progressive Democrats who are not signing on due to their opposition to arming Israel, and only one Republican has added his signature. I mentioned that John Walsh, he's been writing for us about ways that we could stop this military aid bill, and one way is to contact your representative in the House. If they sign the discharge petition, you say you got to withdraw that signature. If they did not sign the petition, you can say, hey, good for you, stick to your guns, don't sign it. And again, those are the progressives. So I think that's something that we could all do. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Joseph Terwilliger. Russia finally says niet to continued North Korea sanctions enforcement. One from Anna Simova. Washington abandons all norms to arm Israel. One from Patrick McFarland. The CIA discredits the Uyghur genocide by admitting covert influence campaign. And that's about, I covered this. There's this report in Reuters recently that said in 2019, Trump signed off on a CIA social media campaign basically designed to denigrate China, to make China look bad. And that actually also involved leaking stuff to global media. And it was around that time we really saw these narratives build up about China and the Uyghurs and other things, organ harvesting, things like that. One from Caitlin Johnstone. Imagine if Russia or China did the things that Israel is doing in Gaza. And the spotlight from James Carden. At 75, has NATO outlived its use? So that's everything for me for today. You can support this show by sharing it, like, subscribe, YouTube, or wherever you watch. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. I will be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Thanks for listening.